Old Street Publishing presents Murder at the Castle, a Miss Merkel Mystery by David Safier. Translated by Jamie Bullock. Narrated by Lisa Armytage. Chapter 1.
"Phew, I must have a little sit-down,"
said Angela, and sat down on a weathered bench by a narrow gravel path with a magnificent view of the lake, the Dumpfsee. She wiped the sweat from her brow with the small handkerchief the Dalai Lama had given her. If only she could say she'd been hiking for hours in the unbearable heat of summer, rather than taking a short stroll in pleasant May sunshine. After all those years in Berlin, when the only time she would hit 10,000 steps per day was pacing up and down in her vast office during the pandemic, she was not in great shape. It was going to be some time before her body, victim of around 3,000 state banquets, approached anything like fitness again. Angela gazed at the Dumpfsee. The small lake was charming in just the ordinary way she liked. There was the perfect proportion of reeds, and they wafted elegantly in a perfectly mild breeze. The water was a perfect blue, while the flight of the birds was more graceful than any ballet she'd ever seen. And Angela had seen a lot of ballets in the course of her state visits around the world. It was one of the greatest feats of her life to have stayed awake beside the President of China through all 7 hours of a Beijing opera, and this despite being seriously jet-lagged. Here, on this bench by this lake, in this weather, she didn't miss Berlin at all, even if she hadn't quite got used to life in her new home of Kleinfreudenstadt. Not that there was anything surprising about that. After all, she'd only been here for 6 weeks. She'd taken a few walks through the village, which was charming in the same modest way as the lake, but she didn't feel at home yet. She couldn't help wondering whether she ever would. What if she started to crave her old hectic life in Berlin? This was her husband's biggest fear, and secretly hers too. She had made him a solemn promise that they would enjoy a peaceful retirement together. For decades he'd had to take a backseat role. Could their marriage survive if she were to break her promise? "Is everything all right, darling?" asked Achim. Her husband's real name was Achim, but as a student he'd decided that Achim was a cool nickname, which of course it wasn't, but then he was a quantum chemist. Now he stood in front of her in a white, short-sleeved shirt and blue cropped trousers that exposed his short, hairy legs. On his feet was a pair of grey walking boots. His cluelessness about fashion was one of the things Angela adored about her husband. She also loved his total honesty. He simply wasn't capable of lying. She often found herself wondering why all men weren't like Achim, but she never wondered for long. If they were, the human race would never have survived. "Darling, I asked you a question." He was always worried about her. "Everything's fine, Muffin. I'm just feeling a bit hot." From his rucksack, which he'd had since East German days, Achim took out an old water bottle, from which his father had drunk before East Germany had even existed. The water always tasted metallic. Still, Angela found it refreshing. "Maybe you should try a new outfit?" Angela was dressed the same way she had been throughout her years as Chancellor, in black cloth trousers and one of her many colourful blazers. Today's was green. The hiking clothes she'd bought 5 years ago were too tight, and in any case they were still languishing in one of the many unpacked removal boxes. "When we go to Templin at the weekend, I'll get something more suitable." There was no way she was going to buy anything on the internet. Thanks to the endless briefings from cybersecurity experts in her former life, Angela knew far too much about what happened to the data of online customers. Anyway, what business of Amazon's was her dress size?
Sample complete. Ready to continue?